Hello and welcome to the Freehand Frame practice page demonstration video. Today is a follow along video and you are going to need a pencil with an eraser and a ruler to follow along. I would like to talk about the difference between these images before we get started. Now we are working from a picture that has a box around the outside edge, and we are working into a box that is the exact same proportions, the same size and dimension as our first original box around our image. We're going to start with something more simplistic, and then we're going to do that same technique going from a box outlined image into the same proportion of a box with something a little bit more complex. Next, we're going to work into a practice where we are taking a box that's smaller and working into a box that is larger but the same proportions. And then we will do an image that has no container, and we're going to create one and help ourselves to draw this more accurately. Now, let's go ahead and get started with our leaves, and something that I think is very beneficial to do, and I'd like for you to do this along with me. We are going to give ourselves a basic shape outline, and I'm going to just go around this leaf and give myself like the same even little gap all the way around. Now, something that did, I touched the outside edge of the frame here, and one thing that I think is helpful is to try to draw the negative space. So I'm going to fill in this little shape. I like continue that line off to the edge. Now I'm going to show myself with my ruler just how far down that mark comes on this space, and then I'm going to place my ruler so that it's lined up with the edge, and I'm going to just like slide it out a little bit so I can use that to help me make sure that the angle is as accurate as I can get it. Now we want it to kind of come out at an angle but not at too much of an angle, and remember that we are drawing nice and lightly, and we are going to be making some sketchy marks first to help ourselves get the proportions and shape, and then we're going to go in and perfect. Now let's go ahead and get started by just measuring out, and I'm just going to measure out how far this stem goes, and I'm going to place my finger right at the edge of my ruler where it stops and scooch it over, sort of like what we did with our barg plate technique and our shish kebab skewers. Now I'm going to fill in this shape, or draw out this negative space that's behind the leaf. So rather than looking at the leaf, I am trying to draw in that shape, and I'm going to have the little tail of the leaf start here, and then it kind of raises up and then dips down just slightly. So we are just adding in that basic shape. Now here's the actual stem of the leaf. Now we have this kind of coming at an angle that's going down. So I'm going to place my ruler here, and I'm paying attention to the gap that I have so that it's parallel with my ruler. And then we're going to help that to lift up and come out and around. So we're just like helping ourselves get the basic shape here. Now let's go inside of this space, and we are going to just draw on that leaf, and we've got a bit of an upturn at the edge of our leaf here, a little corner that comes out, and we are making a triangle here, and we want to place our finger on the reference photo, so have your finger right on top of that space, and we are drawing this triangle, the part that's lifting up. So pretend you're just drawing a triangle, not a leaf. Don't even think about the leaf. Don't believe what you're trying to do. Nope, that was lame. Now, we are going to continue by just curving this up to meet the end where our stem is located here. Now we're going to come back up, and we're going to leave that little gap around our space. We're going to tuck that in, and then we've got the line leading out to the stem right in the center. It's kind of doubled up here. And then we've got 1, 2, 3 vein lines. So we're gonna draw that coming out to the edge, and this one is like right in the middle, and it touches the edge of the leaf here. Now let's see, we've got one short line that leads back to the stem, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 left. I'm gonna do this outside one first, and that leads right to the bottom. We've got one that's like right about here, and then one in between. Now we are going to go through and erase those outside edges. And we can go in and perfect any of these spaces to help it match our example a little bit better. Now, you can take a minute to go through and perfect as needed, but let's go ahead and pick up on our next leaf. We are going to do that same process. This one is all about like practicing those simplistic shapes. I find it very helpful to give yourself that outline first. And it's also very helpful when it touches the outside edge of our box here. So we're just giving ourselves a nice narrow outline. Now remember, we're not drawing the leaf this time. We are drawing the background shapes. So focus on this triangle right in this bottom right corner here. And we can even show ourselves with our ruler where that touches, right about here. And then we're drawing in this skinny little gap. We're going to increase that size here, and then it stretches out to about here. So we're just helping to make this curve, that triangle. Now we're going to bring up this edge so that it touches the other leaf. We've got a bump and then an indent before it drops down. Now let's come in from this other side. This is kind of vertical, and then comes up and comes above this space and then drops down. Now I'm gonna start by coming in and making this little edge. Let's do this together. We've got like this little curve of the leaf that's like spinning around. It's got a bit of a corner here. Now we're not gonna do the edges of the leaf with the points quite yet. We're just gonna get the shape first to be more accurate before we add in those details. So we're just kind of curving that around. Now from this point to this curve is where the line for the center of our leaf is. So we're gonna just draw that in, and then let's draw the bottom edge with that little gap before the bottom of our box. And we do have more space on the bottom with the vein of the leaf than we do on the top. So make sure that reflects in your drawing. All right, now we can go through and erase that outside edge. And let's really pay attention to the veins that we see here. And this one's a little bit more pixelated, so it's harder to tell exactly, but we're gonna make a little Y shape vein on this side. We're gonna do one more that has like a little Y as well, and then one last one stretching towards the stem, and then one that's kind of like wrapping itself up farther. Now let's come from between this one, and we're gonna bring that going forward, and we want to make this kind of parallel with our last one coming forward, and those are like the main veins that we see on the top. Now our last step for this one, we are going to go through and add those jagged edges that we see on the outside edge of the leaf. So we've got one that's here that kind of comes down to a point, one that's here, one that almost touches the bottom, a small subtle one, and there we go. So now you can kind of see we can get some simplistic shapes drawn in pretty easily, and then you would be able to go through and color this using the same techniques that we learned from the Outside the Box project with burnishing our colored pencils, and also the Hipster Animal project will help you understand how to blend your colors together. Now let's do one more with this same method, since we are going from one shape and dimension of box to the exact same shape and dimension of box, but with a slightly more complex detailed image that we're working with. Now let's do that same practice, but this time we're gonna outline, just giving ourselves a little bit of a gap, the outside edge of the face, and then we're gonna bring it back to show ourselves like the edge here. Now I'm gonna use my ruler to show myself where the bottom of the gap we just drew is going to be. And then I'm going to focus on drawing this triangle shape. So I'm gonna fill this in so you guys can see which part I'm focused on. Now, we are going to use our ruler. I'm gonna get that little edge to know exactly how far up that goes. And this was the bottom edge. So now I'm going to try to match that same gap shape with this triangle and the bottom edge. It's almost like an hourglass shape that I'm trying to mimic here. All right, now I'm going to come out, and this is that rounded edge, so I'm trying to make it almost symmetrical in the angles that we come out from. And then we're going to round that out at the back. Now let's go through and add just kind of like the closer up shape. And I'm paying attention to like the gaps that I actually have in my reference photo. I'm going to just like draw in the little shape of the mouth and add like a black line. And then we've got like our little nose. So that's all I'm gonna add for now. Maybe just coming around to add in this little triangle and then one more. And then we've got this one kind of coming up with a little bit of space. And there's our gill so that we know where to draw the eye. And I'm rounding out the bottom of that gill so it curves rather than making a perfect straight edge of a triangle. Now we can come in and draw this circle for the eye, but we want to pay attention to how much space is left around the circle before it touches the fin or the bottom of the chin. We want to make sure that it fits. Now inside of that circle, we're going to draw a smaller circle. And let's leave that side edge for where the side top of the eyelid is touching. Now we're going to draw a circle inside of that circle and one last tiny one. Let's go ahead and fill in that first circle, and then we're gonna add a little bit of darkness on either side here. So there's our little eye. Now we are going to draw a line that shows where the tail spine is. So that's like where the fin is attached to the very direct part of his back. Now something that I think will be helpful is to start with this fin shape. So let's take our ruler and make a mark at where the top of the tail is and where the bottom of the tail is. And I'm just gonna kind of curve that up to see like if I can get that angle to be just exactly the same. So I'm kind of like curving that up, and then I'm gonna lift that up. And while I have my ruler here, I'm gonna look to see if I can make that match that same little arch shape that I've got right here. So I'm looking at this space right here, and I'm trying to make that match right here. So I probably have gone a little too high up. Let's drop that down a bit. All right, so now I've got the basic start of the tail. Now something I can do is I'll go in and give myself the angle here, and I know that it's coming from that part here, so I'm gonna draw in that first angle, and then I'm gonna come in and let's grab this second angle. And I'm placing my ruler on the very edge so that this part is sticking as close to the like side that I'm trying to make sure it's parallel as possible. All right, so there's the start of our tail. Now what we're gonna do next, and I'm going to do this in red so you can really see what I'm trying to point out here. I'm going to trace this line leading back up to the top of this tail. So now we are going to try to copy that line. So let's start here, and I'm just like looking here and trying to make it parallel. We're gonna come across the top of that tail until we get here. So we're trying to match that red line. We're looking back and forth, almost unfocus your eyes, and that can sometimes help as well to get that angle to be parallel in your eye. Peripheral vision, like if your eyes are kind of unfocused, sometimes you can tell a little bit better. Now we are going to come in and we're going to finish the tail edge. So we've got this little curve that we're trying to mimic. We're gonna bring that up to a point, and it doesn't quite touch the edge. And then we're gonna just try to steal some of these actual details. So we've got 1, 2, 3 bumps. Then we've got 1, 2, and then a bigger one, and then 1, 2, and then a bigger one. So here's our tail. Now we're gonna give ourselves this little bottom triangle. And now we can give ourselves the fin that goes right here. So it's like a little crescent moon shape that gets skinny right at that curve. And we can add in the lines that are going up. And then we're going to hop onto the other side of this line, and we're going to add this little fin, and it kind of comes out and around. Pay attention to whether you've got the right size of gap between the fish head and where this scale or fin starts. And you can use slightly sketchy lines until you get it right, and we'll go back and choose your best lines. Now we've got this little fin that's like coming up between this space, so I'm gonna add just this little kind of curve. We've got that fin there. All right, now we're gonna hop around to the other side and create the back edge of the fish. So we're gonna start from this edge, and I think it's helpful to give yourself that line to really pay attention to. So I just outlined that in a different color for myself, so that I can really try to match that same shape here. Now we're going to give ourselves the border of where the scales change color. And we can come in, and even using your ruler, we can help ourselves to decide where the fins need to be placed so that they match the best that you can. And they kind of just are curved around on the side. Now we've got this fin that's coming out on this side. And one last one that's like coming out from next to his head. And it's kind of like curved from the front and has like a rounded shape on the back. All right, now what we're gonna do to finish up this fish is we are going to go through and add the lines that we see, and we've got like some triangles coming in from the bottom of the tail here. So we're gonna add this specific triangle and this specific triangle. And then we're gonna pay attention to when the angles start to shift. So then right here, it kind of starts to go the other way. And we've got like a bigger gap right here, and these lines are kind of like meeting right in the middle of the fin. All right, now we are gonna go through and add the lines for this back fin, paying attention to the angle that they're at. Now we are gonna add the scale that's like curving out. We're gonna just kind of go over the edge of that first line we gave ourselves. Let's give ourselves some of these specific scales on the nose. We've got this kind of curving down towards the front edge of the face, and they come up to meet this scale. All right, now let's add the lines to these bottom scales, and they all kind of have these lines that are like leading out from this like center space in the middle of their fin. So we're gonna just add these like long spindly triangles, all leading back to that center space in the fin. And then one last one. And as we reach the edge of this fin, it's starting to get straighter on those lines. All right, and now we can go through and erase the extra lines and go through and perfect and choose the lines that are the best for our reference photo to match. Now you can go through and complete some of the scale drawing. You can go through and practice coloring here, but that was our demo for this second step of the freehand frame practice page. Thanks so much for watching.